should Nico be concerned at all? We ask you that question, and he better not be. I mean, this is what would be scary if the NCAA still had an immense amount of power. I could see him being sat down for the UTC game, but they don't. So we're in a different world, which is good. But as far as Nico,
Iamaleava.
will he face any sort of punishment? Caleb Calhoun, I'll give you my thoughts, but you lead us off.
No. And I'm going to tell you, this actually goes back to our previous conversation about leadership. Previous leaders at Tennessee would have tried to roll over and say, all right, we'll give him a suspension to kind of walk away with this and let it be.
No, they wouldn't have. Not with football. They would have shot Tony Harris in the foot. But they
okay. We're talking about an administration that fired Bruce Pearl over a violation that wasn't even a violation. That's not even a violation anymore. When they really could have fought the NCAA on that and probably would have won had they had any guts at all to fight.
I don't know.
That time.
Caleb, you know how I feel about that because you're an incredibly honest individual, and I've complimented you on that before. You told me things you didn't necessarily had to. You're like, hey, I just want to let you know this thing didn't go right, and blah blah blah. But lying to your employer to me is like an immediate fireable offense. And the SEC and the NCAA is technically Bruce Pearl's employer. So I didn't have a problem with that. They could have fought their way through it, and maybe that's the more pragmatic, better move. But I just can't stand lying.
You had far and away the most successful coach in your history, though. You kind of got to fight your way through that, though.
I don't know, but you have to have some convictions in life, and to me,
convictions on winning.
Well, my conviction is don't look at me in the face and lie to me. I mean, he looked at Mike Hamilton eye to eye and lied to him, and then when he got busted with the goods, he finally came clean. I mean, that's kind of gross. Wouldn't you at least agree that's kind of gross?
Yeah, but like, okay, sometimes someone lies to you and you know they were trying to lie and they shouldn't have lied, but you also are like, oh, it was stupid that they were even being questioned about this. So look, that's one, Mike Hamilton didn't fire him because he lied to him, because Mike Hamilton was willing to keep him around. It's when he figured out the NCAA was going to keep snooping that he decided I've got to fire him. And I'm like,
I think we're both right. I think we're both right. I think the fact that the things came out and he realized that he had been lying, I think either one would have undermined him. The NCAA continuing to snoop around, like you said, or the fact that he had been caught in a worse lie and it just kept getting worse. I think either one would have gotten him fired. Both together were certainly enough. Sports Treasures carrying over 5 million sports treasures and so much more on Facebook. Best sports memorabilia you can get. Go to facebook.com, follow Sports Treasures TN, Sports Treasures TN. I don't think that Tennessee would have necessarily flopped over and said, hey, just suspend him for the Chattanooga game. But I'm not going to rule it out if it's the NCAA of the 90s when they have that sort of power. I think that very well could have happened. Nowadays, I think you would agree with me, they don't have the power. But had they had it, the same sort of power they had now that they had 20 years ago, yeah, I would think that there's a 50-50 chance Nico would be suspended for the first game, partly because it's primarily meaningless against a Division II opponent.
Yes. And so the other point is we need to bring this up. Was it last year? It was last year, right? Where Tony Vitello got suspended for a weekend for a baseball series. And It seemed like Tennessee was very clearly, in that time, they were trying to stay in the NCAA's good graces because this is from a violation that was pre-NIL, the Jeremy Pruitt scandal. And they were like, hey, let's throw Tony Vitello under the bus for a weekend series because we kind of want to come out of this unscathed. Right? That's exactly what was happening.
And by the way, you do something like that to offset an NCAA investigation, and then they start investigating you again after. I don't blame Dante Plowman for being PO'd. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. So that's exactly what they did. So they suspended Tony Vitello to kind of stay in the NCAA's good graces during this previous investigation that could have been a threat. They ain't suspending Nico for this, though. I think now with the NCAA coming out, one, on principle, if the NCAA came to Tennessee, if they came to Danny White, Dave, and they said, you know what, we'll drop this whole thing if you suspend Nico for a half, I think Danny White's showing them the middle finger. He's showing them 2 birds and saying, "Get the F out of my office."
I don't think they would suspend him for a drive.
I don't either.
I think if the NCAA called and said, "Here's the deal, Danny White, you suspend him for a drive, and the first drive against Chattanooga, and it's all goes away. There is no, and I can't believe I'm saying this, Caleb. There's no NCAA investigation, just suspending for a drive. You should have absolutely done that 20 years ago, arguably 5 years ago, definitely 10 years ago. But now you can stick it. You can take those legal documents, you can put them in your briefcase, and then you can put your tire briefcase where the sun doesn't shine. That's exactly what I would tell.
That's exactly what I would do too. Exactly. By the way,
because they're not going to lose this case. They're not going to lose the case.
This is the situation where Dave, I'm sure you've watched Law and Order in the past. I have, but it happens in real life too. When I
think whatever Sounders has that on it, doesn't it?
You do.
No, anyway, go ahead.
The detectives, they have the perp dead to right. They got him dead to right. And then at that point, he's like, "Well, I'd like to make a deal now." And like, you can't make a deal.
Too late, dude. Too late, dude. It's like that disgusting. Is it Hansen? Chris Hansen? He goes, why don't you sit over there?
Let's take a seat over there to catch a predator.
yeah. Why don't you just take a seat? Well, at that point, you're done. You can say, "No, I brought the Zimas because they're my favorite drink." And I brought protection because I thought I might bump into somebody on the way over here. No, at that point, you're done. You can't say, "Can I just give the Zimas back and apologize and leave?" At that point, it's too late. So it's too late for the NCAA as well. So, I mean, nothing's going to happen to Nico. And I do find it interesting that I think he'll open doors for other players. Because, listen, if a player truly gets to get on the market and test his worth. I don't believe Spire that they would have flown him all over the nation. I think they wanted to support Tennessee. But that being said, how can you tell the young man that he can't fly from school to school on a private jet or whatever the case may be to explore his worth? I mean, you can't tell somebody in the United States of America. I mean, I love Caleb, love him to death. I hope we work together seriously for 20 years. But if he said, "Dave, I got to go interview for this job because it's something that I got to take a look at," I can't say, "Well, you're fined." I mean, you can't do that. It's just idiotic.
You know what? Oh, I agree. And here's the other point, Dave. If the school did suspend Nico for a drive, and this is why they're going to fight. Pretend it's not Nico. It's anybody. It's any high-profile athlete. And the school
makes you look like you did something wrong.
Yeah, you are. Well, it makes you look like you did something wrong. But think from the athlete's perspective. We're in an age of the transfer portal. If Tennessee suspends Nico for a drive, Alabama's giving Nico a call and saying, "Hey, man, Tennessee didn't back you."
Okay, so let's pretend there's the transfer portal, but not NIL. Okay, so if Tennessee committed some sort of violation in the Nico recruitment, and then this is all happening, and you have the transfer portal, and Tennessee paid him, and they weren't supposed to pay him, this whole thing could melt down. Nico could get suspended for a couple of games, decide to transfer because Tennessee recruited him under a bad pretense. Yeah, it could completely blow up, but instead the NCAA is completely impotent and won't.
Yeah, well, where I'm at is basically Nico is the players are going to be like, "You better back me as a school," because let's call it, Dave. Well, we could tell the story, but you have been suspended as a reporter for the Knoxville News Sentinel, right? That happened to you one time.
I have been suspended as a reporter. I did nothing wrong, but yes.
Exactly. The thing that's annoying, you know this, when you get suspended or like reprimanded for doing nothing wrong, when someone does it to make it go away, even if it doesn't financially harm you, it's humiliating and it's frustrating alone. You don't want to be humiliated like that, right? And so,
and I've never really talked about this, I guess, publicly, but it was, even though I knew I did nothing wrong, and for those that don't know, it involved an interview with Inky Johnson in which a person facilitated the meeting because Inky Johnson wanted to tell people how appreciative he was about the fans' response when he suffered that terrible injury against Air Force. What, in 2006?
2006, yes.
2006. So I interviewed him, and the sports information department felt that they had been duped and they hadn't set anything up. So I did it myself. They ended up suspending me. As it turns out, Bud Ford lied about it and almost ended up getting fired for that. But I was already suspended for the Alabama game. But to answer your question, even though the next day I knew I'd done nothing wrong, I was humiliated. I was embarrassed, and I had to go on the air 2 hours the next day. And I remember my grandmother calling me during a break, which she never did. And I said, "Is everything okay?" Because it's one of those phone calls that you're like getting, that you're like, something's got to be wrong if she's calling me during a commercial break. And she goes, "You need to calm down or you're going to have a heart attack right there on the air." And it came across on the air. So yes, I mean, it is humiliating. It's probably a little bit humiliating for Nico just to be thrown out there. Travis says, "I would have suspended you too." Inky wanted to talk and went through an intermediary and actually a coach to talk to me because they trusted me. So I wasn't going to turn down the exclusive interview. I was looking out for you. You wouldn't have turned down the exclusive interview if he wanted to talk. He begged to talk, right?
No, this is why, just for the record, I hope you're not upset with me, Dave. I felt comfortable bringing it up because you, like, the story now makes you look really good and makes the Tennessee Sports Information Department look totally incompetent. Speaking of bad leadership, but
Smoky Mountain Red says, "I've heard more negative things about Bud Ford than good over the years." Well, if you like a man who professionally in professional settings likes to dog cuss somebody, he's a fantastic individual. By the way, I do want to say, Claude Felton, did I get a chance to introduce you to Claude Felton, the Georgia sports information person?
No, you and Dave and Jimmy were talking about him yesterday, but
he retired after 49 years. Kudos to him. By the way, and in that Inky Johnson thing, I remember getting called and they said, "You need to come into the office." I never went into the office in the Sentinel just to pick up my mail. And I said, whoa, with all this going on, is this a good thing or a bad thing? And my editor at the time said, "It's a good thing. Get in here." And I got employee of the month, the same month I was suspended. I got off the hook, as Jeff says.
Nice.
Yeah.
So, okay, but and also we talk about this. Let's think about this, Dave. So you're right. It's humiliating even if you did nothing wrong to be suspended, even for a drive, to accept it. Also,
I was in the New York Times as you never want to be a part of the story. Nico doesn't want to be a part of this story, but the NCAA cares. They'll drag anybody through the mud. You don't think that they leaked that it was about Nico and a private jet? They leaked that.
Of course they leaked it. And here's the other part. I don't know Nico's family, but we have talked about the sense of pride and the familial pride that comes with many Polynesian players, right? And
I hadn't thought about that, but I'm telling you, I bet he is more embarrassed than the average cat walking around.
Right, exactly. And so I think if Tennessee wants to keep Nico, they are going to back him and they are going to dog cuss the NCAA out on behalf of Nico, won't they? And they are going to make it very clear, you did nothing wrong and we're backing you no matter what. And if the NCAA tells us to suspend you, like you said, suspend you for a drive, we're not going to do it. You are I think they're making, and I want to bring this up because the principle of a suspension to make something go away, you only do it if you are in danger of more severe punishments. They're not in danger of anything at Tennessee. I think they really are ready to, again, guys, we talked about this yesterday. The NCAA came at Tennessee because they had already come at Florida State, and they thought we can come at Tennessee, flex our muscles a little bit. They'll roll over and take a small punishment, and we can show that we still matter. That was their intent, right, Dave? That's what the NCAA was thinking.
Yeah, I do. And okay, so
they didn't realize that Tennessee would throw some middle fingers at him and say, "Oh, you're going to war now over this."
Absolutely. Go to our YouTube page and go ahead and vote if you haven't to this point. Our poll question today: how does the Tennessee NCAA lawsuit end? Slam dunk Vols win 69% of the vote. NCAA settles 26% of the vote. I think I've moved people over a little bit. Vols and Virginia lose is about 5%. The NCAA is going to settle. I'm going to go ahead and put the over-under right now. The NCAA settles. What's today? It's the first day of February, right? The NCAA settles by, let's just pick tax day, April the 15th, before or after?
I think they're actually going to drag it. I think it's going to go after. I think the NCAA, just to save face, is going to desperately try to fight this to pretend that they're not about to collapse.
I think it's before. I think it's before, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's before the end of February.
Wow. Oh, interesting.